We've seen some pretty weird and wonderful cards over the years, and actually a fair few of them from Zotac. This time they've teamed up with Marvel to release a whole bunch of gaming hardware that features Spider-Man branding, tying it in with the most recent Across the Spider-Verse movie and building on the hype. But before we get into that, here's a quick word from this video sponsor.
I'm never going to be an esports gamer. I never get any kills.
I wouldn't be so sure of that.
Is that Andy Raffel from eTeknix.com?
Yes, my son, it is me, Andy Raffel from eTeknix.com.
What are you doing here?
I'm here to bestow upon you a gift that will transform you into a true gamer. With a 24.5-inch Full HD screen, 240Hz refresh rate, 0.5 millisecond response time, AMD FreeSync Premium, and height adjustability, you'll be gaming in the big leagues in no time.
Thank you.
No problem, my son. Why don't you check out the link in the description below to find out more.
So looking at the Spider-Man aspect first, depending on what card you get, some of the more expensive GPUs have custom backplates and are quite heavy on the branding, while the more budget-focused RTX 4060 that I'm looking at today comes with custom packaging, some stickers that can be applied to the GPU, and it's meant to come with a bag, but we actually got this little box and a little figurine instead. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about the card. If you've not already checked out our other RTX 4060 content, I'd invite you to do so, as it's the most affordable GPU in the RTX 4000 series so far. And while we doubt people will be upgrading from their 3000 or maybe even their 2000 series of cards for whatever gains it will offer, those on the older 1000 series cards that are still the most popular on the Steam hardware survey are the ones that are likely to benefit the most, as something like the GTX 1060 struggles in the latest games on the market, often sitting closer to 30 FPS, while the new RTX 4060 is a heck of a lot faster in comparison. Now the card we have here today is the Zotac Twin OC, which is one of the shortest RTX 4060 cards that we've seen so far. But while it may be shorter, it does feature a wider heatsink and shroud design, allowing them to integrate two large 90mm fans that run pretty much side to side and front to back of the shroud. The card is, I guess, I'll be honest, a little bland to look at though, and I was hoping for something, I don't know, more colourful given the whole Spider-Man box art, and well, this is just a grey shroud, which is a bit of a letdown really. That being said, if you do like a more understated graphics card, this isn't a bad thing, and the shroud is at least neat and tidy, and with it only taking up 2 slots, it's going to be easy to integrate into a smaller form factor build, which is kind of something Zotac have always been good at doing. The spot in the middle of the fans is where you can apply the included stickers, but for a Spider-Man card, only 3 of the stickers are Spidey themed, and the other 5 are Zotac themed, which again, just feels like for this model it was a bit of an afterthought. Though you do get this pop-out cardboard box thingy, and that's pretty neat I guess, but I can't complain too much as this card is MSRP focused, so you're kind of getting something extra, but for no extra cost. Now back to the design. There is a good amount of ventilation on the sides of the card, with a thick heat pipe exposed, ensuring the heat is more evenly distributed throughout the heatsink. And like all the other RTX 4060s we've seen, the card sticks with the older 8-pin PSU connector, so there's no need to upgrade your PSU or use some silly adapter, something that's been, well, a hot topic since its inception and has carried on even with all the problems it's had. Now the backplate looks good, but again I was expecting something Spidey. Though that aside, it does have few ventilation cutouts which together should provide additional protection and heat dissipation for the PCB. At the rear of the card you'll find a single HDMI as well as 3 display ports, which is fairly standard, although some of the cards from other brands opt for 2 HDMI and 2 DisplayPort connectors if that better suits your need. Obviously this is all going to come down to personal preference. Now the heatsink is easily removed, and as you can see it has quite a large contact plate with a single thick heat pipe running in an S shape through the thick base plate. On the other side there's a lot of mass here with some of the thickest fins I've seen on a modern graphics card. It looks more like a large passive heatsink, but with those 2 large fans that cover almost all of it, cooling performance should be pretty decent on this card. Though I am a little bit worried because it is quite a bit smaller than some of the other RTX 4060s that we've seen. Now the PCB is quite small as expected, with the card having 4 2GB SK Hynix GDDR6 memory ICs, and while there is room for a few more on the PCB, there's no word on a higher VRAM model just yet, and that's instead reserved for the 4060 Ti 16GB, which is due very soon. Now in terms of power, we again, like other RTX 4060s, see a a 4+1 phase setup, with the GPU sporting the Sinopower 4570NA and 4514NH MOSFETs, which are rated for 60 amps of concurrent power. They are all controlled by the Bright Power BPD93004E controller, while the memory, which uses the same MOSFETs in a single phase design, simply uses a 7212 buck controller, which is actually pretty typical of what we've seen on other RTX 4060s as of late. Now, in terms of speeds, the boost clock, being an OC model, comes in slightly raised at 2475 MHz, which is a small but modest boost over the 2460 MHz that the Inno3D card that we looked at recently came in with, another card that is also MSRP. So let's see if that extra boost speed means anything in terms of extra performance. So kicking things off with Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 on the Ultra preset, and at 1080p the Zotac throws itself straight into the mix when compared to the Inno3D Twin X2. Though what's interesting is that while it sits 2% ahead in the averages, it does actually fall around 9% behind in the 1% lows. Cyberpunk sees the two cards trade places, now with the Inno card sitting ahead by 3% in the averages and 9% ahead in the all-important lows. Death Stranding always runs great and gives us some great performance, which is in line with where we'd expect at 152 FPS, though again the Inno card just sits ahead, albeit by a very small margin. Then lastly, in Watch Dogs Legion, both 4060 sit with identical FPS in the averages, but again the Zotac just seems to fall behind by a small margin in the 1% lows. Due to the performance being similar and somewhat falling behind, it's no surprise that the Zotac card sits just ahead of the Inno3D card in terms of the cost per frame. It's not bad and still one of the best performing cards in terms of value for money, but even then the likes of the RX 7600 does offer up much better value in the grand scheme of things. Now, GPU performance and value to one side, the main reason anyone looks at different cards from AIBs these days comes down to the cooler and thermal and acoustic performance that can actually be offered. And it's here where we ran the card in an hour-long test of F122 and saw the GPU temperature coming in around 76 degrees throughout the test. It actually ran a little hotter than the Inno3D card, and the same again for the hotspot temps, with the Zotac coming in with a max of 94 degrees over Inno's 85. Also, the fans were barely audible with a max fan usage of 1739 RPM, which does put it quieter than the Inno3D card, which could be why the temps on the Inno card were slightly better because, well, it was noisier. Finally, for the power, the card ran at a max of 119.3 watts throughout the duration of our test, so again, pretty typical of what we'd expect. Okay, so let me start by addressing the Zotac collaboration. They, as a brand, have done some really cool things with their Spider-Man license. But I don't know, I'm sad to say that their efforts on the RTX 4060 just aren't one of them. I can appreciate this is a budget card, so putting an expensive Spider-Man backplate on the card may be too much, but it's basically just the stock black or grey card in a box with some stickers and a pop-out cardboard thingy and this, well, I don't even know what this is, but this. And it just falls a bit flat for Spider-Man fans in my opinion. That aside, this is still a great looking graphics card, and we've seen Zotac use this cooler design in the past. Now, it was good then and it's still good now, so if it's not broke, don't fix it. The thick heatsink and large fans waste none of the available space, and despite the smaller size of the card, it's actually a very robust cooler design for this, let's say, modest GPU. And the overall build quality of the card just feels very good in general. Overall though, the temperatures are good and the card runs nice and quiet, which are always kind of good things for any GPU, but I feel its size maybe does let it down a little when it gets beaten by a different brand who comes in at the same price. Now, when it comes to performance, the card is pretty much on par with the competition. They all have custom coolers and a few of them are slightly overclocked from the factory, like this, but largely they're all vaguely different flavours of the same thing. And that's no fault of Zotac, that's kind of more on Nvidia, and it's very much the same story with AMD as well. And then, for the most part, it boils down to which brand you like, which kind of design you like, and of course, the price. Thankfully for Zotac, they are a cool brand with a good reputation, and their card comes in at a good price. So while I guess the Spider-Man aspect may have been, let's say, overplayed on the box and in the marketing, at least on this model, I still think it's a great investment for those looking to maybe upgrade from older graphics cards such as a GTX 1060, especially if you're still running a 3GB model. But it's then also likely of little interest to those on something more recent such as the RTX 3060. Though I do feel, due to its size, it actually has a really big appeal to those building mini ITX systems. It's kind of something that Zotac have always been good at, and that's why they actually make their own systems using their own ITX graphics cards. And that about wraps it up. What do you think? Has the Zotac Spider-Verse card done enough, or will it kind of fall on deaf ears, especially for those who are fanboys of Spider-Man? Let me know in the comments section below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, a like and a sub to the channel would be amazing. And if you love what we do, then consider supporting us over on Patreon, where you get access to a ton of goodies, including behind the scenes content, super special area on our Discord, bi-weekly game nights, and much, much more. The link for all that great stuff is down below. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. See you later, guys.